Hello, listeners. This is Kat. Welcome back to Put Your Hands Up Podfics. This will be the continuation of Prodigal. This will be Part 4, Chapter 4, entitled Izuku Was Not Icarus. Izuku's immediate response when he got home was to contact the police. More accurately, he contacted Naomasa, one of the few people who knew about One for All. Izuku hoped that he could help him. If he could not be a hero student, perhaps he could try his hand at working with the police force. Some underground heroes had started that way, and if there was any realm that would accept a quirkless hero, it was the underground. Even though it was short notice, he agreed to meet Izuku that night. The moment that Naomasa saw him, his grin disappeared. "Look that bad, huh?" Izuku's tired voice carried sorrow, too deep for his youth. "Something's wrong," the detective muttered, placing a hand on his shoulder. "What happened? Are you all right? Wait, shouldn't you be at school?" Izuku nodded. "Something's come up. We need to talk." The officer searched his face for answers, but finding none on his own, escorted the kid back to his apartment. Izuku smiled at the homeliness of the flat. There were pictures lining the walls, and his couch had pillows whose colors did not match at all. Files were scattered across the table, and he could hear chimes clinking from the balcony. His eyes scanned the photographs. He stopped. Staring back at him were the bright blue eyes of Toshinori Yagi. Izuku sucked in a harsh breath. Naomasa glanced at him and then followed his gaze. "Midoriya? Has he told you yet?" The detective gently placed his coat over the back of one of his chairs. "Told me what?" "That was a no, then." "I don't have it." His heart clenched. He thought it would get better each time he said it. It hurt Thursday morning when All Might had told him. It hurt when he sobbed it out to Bakugo, and it still hurt. Why would it not stop hurting? "Don't have—" Naomasa's eyes widened. "You lost One for All?" Tears immediately sprung to his eyes. Izuku looked away and took a step back. God, the blame thing. He had forgotten how often he had been blamed for things before. It never got easier, it seemed. He was going to have to do so much readjusting. "I didn't mean to. It wasn't— Lost isn't the right word, and—" Hey, Midoriya, calm down." The detective walked forward and placed both hands on his shoulders. He steered him toward the couch with the tenderness that Izuku had come to expect from Aizawa. "I'm not blaming you, okay?" "You're not?" His eyes snapped upwards. Naomasa's face split into a warm smile. "Course not, kid. Just, wow, is All Might okay?" Izuku swallowed, grateful that he had not started sobbing uncontrollably. 16 was far too old to be losing his grip in front of adults. "Yes, he's the one who made me give it away." If Todoroki were here, Izuku could have blamed the sudden drop in room temperature on his quirk. However, it was actually due to the pure fury that overcame the detective's entire body. He stiffened next to the teen on the couch, body gone rigid, and eyes flaring. His smile dropped, and any kindness disappeared out the window like the notes of his chimes. "What?" Izuku could not stop himself from scooting an inch to the left in case he needed to run for it. His eyes unconsciously scanned the room for exit points. 2 windows, door behind. The 10 years of training to escape and hide due to the bullies was starting to resurface. "Yeah, yesterday, he told me that I had to give it up." He swallowed again and raised his eyes. "I no longer possess One for All. I'm quirkless." A hand raised, but Izuku did not flinch. He had fought Overhaul Shigaraki muscular. The bravery that he had expressed when he first ran to save Katon had grown into something palpable. A courage that exuded from his very skin. Even now, with the horrible reality of his resumed place at the bottom of society, he would not tremble. The hand did not strike, as middle school Izuku would have expected. Instead, a warm palm encased his skin. Hey, kiddo, look at me." The simple order alone made him almost burst into tears. Naomasa's eyes had refilled with tender affection. "Listen, we'll figure it out, okay? This is not your fault." "But he said I didn't do enough, and I don't care what he said." And there was an edge to his voice. A sword tipped with poison was settling on the detective's tongue, and the blade was not poised to strike at Izuku. "Midoriya, you are amazing. Look at me, hey." The softness in his voice warmed Izuku down to his toes. He dared not look away. "Midoriya, I can't speak for Yagi, but I'm incredibly proud of you." And then Izuku burst into tears. Now Masa patted his head affectionately and hummed while the teen gripped the front of his shirt and sobbed. Those words had been said to him by All Might, but they had lost all meaning when he had delivered the blow in that hospital room. He barely knew now Masa, but something in the man's voice reminded him of a father, of Sensei. "I don't deserve that," he whimpered. The detective's gaze clouded momentarily. "You do, and I'm sorry people made you feel like you don't. Everyone from your childhood, because I've seen the quirkless statistics. The adults, All Might. You've done more than anyone could expect from you, kiddo." Izuku searched his eyes for the lie. He looked and analyzed this man beside him. He was telling the truth. He sniffed, wiping his nose. "Thank you." Now Masa ruffled his hair affectionately. "We'll figure this out, kid. If anyone can be a quirkless hero, it's you." "That's kind of what I wanted to talk to you about." Midoriya swallowed and cleared his throat. He knew that talks would need to happen, about his emotions and the repercussions of being thrust back into a world of abuse and cruelty, but they could wait. Saving people was his priority. "I was wondering if I could, well, if you're all right with it, of course. You don't have to say yes, and I know I'm only 16, and I'm a kid without, a quirk, but I could use my analysis or something, and—" "You want to work with the Force?" Izuku hung his head. "I know, it's ridiculous. Sorry for wasting your time." He made a move to rise from the couch, but the detective's hand on his arm made him freeze. "No," Almasa grinned. "No, that's a great idea. Sometimes young heroes aid the police to gain experience and credit. I've heard all about your analysis skills from Yagi, and—" His bright demeanor shifted at the mention. Izuku almost apologized for bringing a potential rift between the friends. All Might had so few left now. He would hate to be the reason he lost another. However, he said nothing. Now Masa sighed and mustered up a small smile. "I'd be honored to call you a colleague, Midoriya. Who knows? Lots of underground heroes have started by working with the police on undercover and recon missions. I know that. Listen, it's not going to be easy being a hero without a quirk, kiddo. You know that. But I believe in you." He stared up at the man whose smile made the edges of his vision blur. "Really?" Now Masa chuckled tenderly. "Yeah, I do." Hope sparked inside his chest. An image of standing in Mirio's shadow flashed across his eyelids. He felt a fire begin to grow within him. That was fine. Izuku had always been good at finding the light. He would just have to run pretty damn fast to catch up with him. "Izuku, you too can be a hero." The Viridian-haired teen stood and held out a scarred hand. Each scar told a story of his trial, his error, his victory. He could not wait to gain more. He could not wait to stand atop the mound of all the insecurities and doubt that he had beaten down. He could not wait to see his name on the board of the top 10 heroes. "Detective, it will be a pleasure working with you." Now Masa grinned, wide and proud. He stood gripping his hand in a vice. "Deku, the pleasure is all mine." Izuku parted from his new boss with a spring in his step. By the time he had settled into his room after dinner, 4 case files had been sent to his phone. He barely contained a triumphant howl, and for a second it felt like One for All was coursing through his veins once more. "Okay," he hummed. "Let's get to work." "I can't do this anymore." Monday evening came with that mumbled confession from his mother. Izuku looked up from his newest case file. "Mom?" Inko stood at the doorway to his bedroom with a horribly familiar expression on her face, even blurred by the years that had passed. Izuku could still remember the way his father's eyes had misted over with tears even as his mouth twisted in anger. His stomach pinched as her eyes snapped to his. "I can't do this again, Izuku," she rasped, and in between the anger, he could hear the heartbreak. He wished it was not such a common tone used around him. He wished that his mere existence did not inspire suffering. "I did it when you were little, and when you were in middle school. I had finally been able to stop being so worried when you went to UA, but if you're back and you lost your quirk, then what am I—" "Mom, what are you saying?" He stood, closing the file and sliding it into the mound of papers that Naomasa had sent him. "What's wrong?" "You can't." The words seemed to be stuck in her throat. Her eyes closed tightly, and she brought her hands up to clutch at her chest. She was hurting. He had always hated it when his mom was hurting. Since before he could really remember, he had been looking out for his mom. He helped her carry the groceries. He cleaned the kitchen. He did the dishes. He hid his bruises and his scars from bullies. He pushed a smile onto his band-aided cheeks to ease her worries. He had always tried so hard not to cause her any more pain, but he always seemed to mess up. That appeared to be an eternal trend, didn't it? Mom, what's wrong? Are you hurt? Did something happen at work, or... You can't stay. Silence. Izuku's heart shattered at his feet. He had heard those words before, hiding in the hallway as his parents fought for the last time. She had screamed them at his father with the fury of a mother bear whose cub was threatened. Now she wailed them with a defining poison. A snake curled in on itself and poised to strike. Tears streamed down her cheeks, but her eyes were mad. They blazed with an anger that he had never received. Mom? You cannot stay here, Izuku, she repeated with more fervor, the shakiness in her voice quelled. I tried. I really did, but you're disappearing at night and you come back at odd times in the morning and I can't handle having to worry about you again. The gray hairs that I got during your middle school years were almost too much to bear, and you're 16 now. I shouldn't have to be afraid that I'll come home to find your body, or your death is on tomorrow's morning news. Izuku blinked. He had gone to meet Naomasa every night since Friday, it was true. The detective schedule was hard to work around, and since he was saving people's lives, the teen only thought it right. If he was the one sacrificing his sleep to talk about their cases, had it really been upsetting her that much? And now you're working on all these suspicious papers, Izuku. It's like you've started up your journals again. He wanted to point out that he'd never stopped journaling about heroes, ergo he could not start them again, but his voice seemed to have failed him. Inko shook her head and waved her hands. I'm sorry, Izuku, but you have to leave. I can't handle the stress that you put me under anymore. He sucked in a tight breath. It did not seem enough. He felt dizzy. You're kicking me out? You're 16, baby. Her eyes hardened. If you're old enough to be a hero, you're old enough to be on your own. Dread burst alive in his chest. She was serious. He stepped back, hands shaking. What? Mom, what on earth is going on? I'm demanding that you leave, Izuku. Her volume grew to a shout, and he jumped. His mom never raised her voice, not to him. Each new syllable she uttered was another bullet to his heart. Pack up your things and leave. He felt the sob in his throat before it pierced his lips. Where am I supposed to go? You're a smart boy, Izuku. You'll find somewhere. It just can't be here. Not anymore. Maybe this was a nightmare. It was such a childish thought, but he reached down and pinched his arm with trembling fingers anyway. He opened his eyes, and no, she was still there, angry and crying and telling him he had to go. Why? He whimpered. Why are you... What did I do? You don't stop, Izu. The endearment must have slipped out without her wanting it to, because she bit her lip and stepped away from the threshold. Her green hair fell into her face as she pushed it back with stiff hands. You never quit, even now. You've been kicked out of UA. And how valiantly he wanted to scream that it was not his fault, that he was not always to blame, not for this, not for his quirklessness, not for his simple existence. You said that was a good thing. You said that you'd be cheering me on. I never thought that you'd actually make it, Izuku. She barked, the perfect picture of a dog baring its teeth. And when you did, it was a relief, yes. But now you're back, and I don't know if we'll be attacked by villains or be kidnapped, and every day I wake up more scared than when I went to sleep. I can't do it. Why now? He whined pathetically. God, did it really take just this to break him, after all he'd gone through? Though it made sense. His mother had always been the dearest to him. It made perfect sense that her disowning would be his downfall. He really was a weak, useless Deku. All the courage that he had felt when he met Naomasa disappeared in the face of this loss. Inko stared at him for a moment before whispering. Because I have chosen you from the moment you were born. I worked so hard to afford the best schools I can. I could have gone with your father, you know. He was willing to take me with him to America and leave you with the Bakugos, and I wanted to so badly, but I didn't. For you. This information shocked Izuku to his core. You would have left me. Are you surprised? So does everyone else. Everyone abandons you in the end. Your father, Katsuki, All Might. You were already causing so much trouble, Izuku. You got into fights at school, and you kept running after little Katsuki even when he told you to stop. Inko gestured wildly. I mean, you were 4, Izuku, and your father knew that being quirkless would change the rest of your life. He knew what would happen, and he... You would have left me? He repeated brokenly, tears bursting into his eyes. I know I was a tough kid, Mom, but I tried really hard not to mess up. But you did, Izuku, she screeched, and Izuku felt his arm jerk. She was using her quirk unconsciously as she lost control of her emotions. You were a hassle, and every day I tried my best. I've taken care of you for years. Now it's high time I take care of myself. I can't let you stay. Izuku had lost his quirk. The ground beneath his feet had shattered. He was kicked out of UA. The edges of his world disappeared. His mother was making him leave his home. He fell down, 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 into the darkest hole he had ever seen. Tunnel vision into a pit of nothingness and hopelessness. Mom, he would beg. He would. He had lost enough to know that sometimes pleading like a child afforded him the smallest grace. No, Izuku. Firm. She sounded like his father. I'm giving you 10 minutes. 10 minutes, he cried, sob racking around his voice and making him sound just as desperate as he was. And then I want you out of this house, do you hear me? I want you gone. Izuku knew pain. He had known it all his life. At 4 years old, he learned the feeling of explosions across his skin. He learned to tear, to bruise, to crack, and to have to glue himself back together because no one else would. He understood abuse and neglect and the constant weight of knowing he was worth so much less than everyone else. He knew the pain of shaking arms, broken fingers, legs bloody and twisted. Izuku knew pain. He wished he did not have to add abandonment to his long resume of past inconveniences. He was beginning to think that that was all he was. As he shakily threw random things into a bag, he looked back on his life. His teachers, his classmates. All he had been was a bump in the road. They sneered at him and dismissed him as he only caused annoyance. Aizawa called him problem child. What could make it more obvious? It was exactly like all the others. Quirkless, mistake, unwanted. All Might was right about one thing. He had never had realistic dreams. Neither had Icarus. Look where that had gotten him. Izuku had flown, wonderfully and spectacularly. He had soared higher and higher, careening towards his own destruction in the beauty of the open sky. He had reached toward the sun, toward his dreams, and he had gotten burned. Falling, fell, fallen, crashing into the ground with nothing to save him, nothing to repair his shattered wings. He was alone. Inko did not watch as he left. She remained resolutely cleaning the kitchen. Izuku stopped on the door's threshold and glanced back at her. Perhaps if he had been less kind and more strong, more like Katsuki, he would have been angry. He would have shouted and screamed and gotten her arrested or something, but no. He had never been like that. He had always given people too many chances, forgiven too much. They were all right. He really was pathetic. Mom, he breathed into the silence. She did not turn. I love you. He saw her shoulders stiffen. For a moment it looked as if she would reply. She did not. Izuku swallowed and nodded. With one sniff to stop the tears, he pulled the doorknob and stepped out into the hallway. He closed the door behind him. He had enough money to get him a few days, but no more. He had a few snacks and some changes of clothes. His notebooks were stuffed into every nook and cranny he could find. He was sure that many pages would be crumpled when he took them back out. He had his phone and laptop and his case files in another bag slung over his shoulder. He would not risk them getting hurt among the various crap he had in his backpack. He should have immediately gone to someone like Naomasa. Hell, he could have called Aizawa. They would have worked something out. Instead, he just started walking. He walked down the dark and cold streets with no real goal. He must have walked for hours. Suddenly, and all at once, he came to himself on top of a roof. Realization came slowly. Old feelings that had been beaten down by hope resurfaced. Oh, this was the roof where... Well, this was hilarious. Some dark part of Izuku began to laugh. It bubbled up like poison within his chest and overflowed to his lips, pouring down his chin like the sludge he could still sometimes taste on his tongue. Anxiety paired with bitterness within him, and he doubled over from the tears and cackles that were exploding from within him. The sounds escaping his mouth were broken, just like him. You too can become a hero. Horse shit. Izuku dropped his bags. He walked toward the edge like a phantom. Unaware of what he was doing yet, so horribly awake at the same time, he stepped up on the ledge, hands grasping the railing in front of him. Breaths left him in short gasps and laughter had stopped. Now he was just right back to middle school Izuku, depressed, unwanted, and alone. Maybe Bakugo was right. He carefully lifted himself over the fence. All he had to do was close his eyes and let go. Then it would all be over. It would be over and done, and he could be free. Icarus, heading toward disaster but flying. He imagined it, and for a beautiful second, the world was quiet. Nothing. He would be nothing. His body would crack against the pavement far below. Blood would splatter across the concrete. His skull might split in two. His lungs might fill with fluid. But Izuku would be gone. Heaven would never want him. He knew that much. But at least he would be free. All it took was one step. He had nothing left. He was nothing. Take a swan dive off the roof of the building. His phone buzzed in his pocket. Startled, he grabbed onto the railing to look. It was from Bakugo. Look at the idiot who decided to put his finger in an open socket and blew the power box in the dorms. Underneath the text was a picture of the Baku squad piled atop Kaminari. Various lights from phone and flashlights made the shadows disappear. They chased away the darkness in the room and in Izuku's mind. The reality of his position hit him like a bus, and he scrambled back over the railing. He collapsed to the ground in a sobbing mess, body trembling. He heaved up his lunch onto the cold roof and probably his breakfast, too. Tears mixing with the vomit on his chin, and that made him gag again. Blood mixed with the mess, and he must have bit his lip or something. God, what was he doing? Where was the courage he had found just days before? Another buzz. With shaking fingers, he picked up the device and wiped his chin. You better not be dead, nerd. Don't think I can't tell you read this. Izuku felt his lips twitch. He texted back a laughing emoji. Don't get sappy on me, Kachan. They look happy. Izuku sighed heavily and struggled to his feet. Carefully stepping around his disaster, he picked up his things. They miss you. We. This time, the smile won out. It tore across his busted lips and made his cheeks hurt. Bakugo was bold this evening. It's mutual. Izuku straightened his tremor-filled shoulders and forced himself to walk back down the staircase and into the world. No matter what, he would try. If he could do nothing else, if his life proved anything, it was that he would try. Izuku Midoriya always gave it his all. It was not time to abandon that idea now, not ever. Bakugo was right. Quirk or no quirk, he still had work to do. All right, listeners, this concludes Chapter 4 of Prodigal. Chapter 5 will be next. I hope you all are still enjoying this fic, and as always, thank you so much for listening.